but I've been having this thought lately where it's like, how can anybody ever really be happy? Or maybe let's replace happy with peace, right? How can anybody really ever be at peace when we know all the things going on in the world, right? And we could literally spend the next 45 minutes just listing out, and we wouldn't even come close to all the horrible things that are happening today in this world just today. And then if we start going backwards, I mean, that's it, right? There's so much horrible stuff that's happened throughout human history, things that have happened, people suffering needlessly often. And it makes me wonder, like, are we just, selfishly, intentionally, whatever it is, like or maybe we're forced to not think about that stuff. And that's the only way we could find true peace and happiness. Because we actually opened ourselves up to everything that's happening in the world. We would never have any peace because it's just too much suffering. It's too much to be done. Even if we do our bit today, there's 100,000 other things that we could be doing to fix it, right? So again, very cynical view maybe, but also I think accurate and realistic to an extent. And it's one of those things I think people often don't want to think about because it's too uncomfortable, because there's not anything we could do about it in the spirit of what you're saying. How do you think about peace in terms of that? When there's so much turmoil and suffering in the world, how do you get peace in that?
I feel like it's very impossible for me. It's impossible to tease out peace from hope.
Mm,
Um, I think that I find myself in situations where the hope is that X, Y, and Z happens, and if X, Y, and Z does not happen, I've found that I've learned to have peace where I am in that process.
mm,
A couple years ago, I would be speaking differently. I've often moved with a sense of urgency that is not at the same pace. Not that I'm saying I have to negotiate
mm,
my values and my beliefs around where I think things should be. But a couple of years ago, I didn't look at peace the way that I'm looking at it now.
mm,
So I think that's one aspect of kind of being honest with myself, to your point, and realistic around this notion of peace and happiness, but the reality of the world. The other thing that I think is important to highlight when we're thinking about peace and hope is that, like, it's almost like cooking for me. Not, and I don't want to downplay the seriousness of it, but if you're cooking and you're adding ingredients, like, what is the best possible ingredient? I mean, a dish that you prepared and all the ingredients are hitting the way they're supposed
mm,
to hit, and then how consistently can you do it the same way? Probably not as well as you did before, but as a cook, you're constantly putting ingredients in and you're tasting, trying to make sure it's just right. And I feel like that is what hope does.
mm,
Like, it's the thing that you're adding to get to that peace that you need for that moment. But it's not going to be the same thing next time. It's impossible. And so I've gotten to a place where, for me, I have to be at peace with that. I have to be at peace with what I was able to get at that moment, understanding that my hope is far beyond what I'm experiencing in that moment. And I think that's the messiness of it. But I think, to your point, that's where, we realize how human we are.
mm,
We realize how much we really don't control.
mm,
And even though I'm talking to you about influence, I mean, how much influence do I really have? Right. So that piece is what centers me to be able to keep going
mm.
outside of the reality of the world, outside what I can't control, outside what I can or can't influence. Is that what contains me so that I can keep going?
Mm. What's the source of the hope, right? And this very much in the spirit of what we're
Oh,
talking about. It's easy to let that hope die out and say,
mm,
whether it be I can't influence this, I can't change this, or the world is just too messy and ugly, or these people are just assholes, or whatever it is, right? Human nature is
yeah,
just what
yeah.
doomed us. Where's the hope come from?
Um, so I read this article, and the writer of the article, he said something that struck me, and I think I'll think about it for the rest of my life. He said that perspective is the anchor for empathy. And I think that understanding, first of all, the experiences that I've had where I felt that I was experiencing some injustices. I felt that I was experiencing the limited opportunities, access. I feel like imposter syndrome. I wasn't able to show up as myself, or doubting myself as a result of the spaces that I was in. I think that was the first level of me understanding the need for hope, because what I wanted for myself, right? And then as I began to experience the world and people around me and start seeing the experience, the same things happening to other people, after that empathy hit me that way, and I'm saying this is at a young age, right? So like even when I was in high school, when it hit me that way, it was like at that point in time when I realized the hope that I needed to have, not just for me, but because of me, for other people. When I was a classroom teacher, the first time that I had my full-time classroom experience, and I tell this story to people often, and it's probably the closest I'll get to understanding self and others in the space of equity. I had I was a self-contained teacher, and folks who may not know what that is like I supported students who were categorized as having an emotional disturbance, and so they were with me the entire day. All high school kids too, right? And so they had to learn every subject with me. And I was at class one day, and I can't even recall the lesson or where I was teaching, but we were having a conversation. And so I asked, conviction hit literally at this moment. I asked the scholars, like, hey, what other places can you go where they tell you when you can go to the restroom, they tell you when you can have recess, they tell you when you can eat. What other spaces do you know of where that happens? And I'll never forget, one of my scholars said prison. And so there was this reflection, this awful conviction that I had with myself, where I was beginning to realize that because I was complicit in this space, I was helping them to practice for prison. Right? Like, I am preparing you for prison through this school to prison pipeline. And what I thought was peace, because all of the bad kids that never went to class now love going to class and I had great relationships with, that was peace for me. I'm like, boom, I'm doing it, right? Like, everyone thought that they couldn't. They usually run teachers off. I'm still here. Boom, that peace was gone, like in a matter of moments. And so that cycle happened all over again, where I had to think about the hope behind where my peace came from. And so my next phase was now disrupting another person's peace, right? Like, now I'm saying, hey, classroom teachers out in this general ed space, no, my scholars deserve to be in your class too. And they're like, no, we don't want the bad kids, or no, I don't want you to. So now the peace that I'm searching for now becomes the disruption of another person's peace or control or influence. And so it's this ongoing process of lifelong learning, of navigating spaces, of empathy and understanding other people's positions, but at the same time holding true to, for me, what I believe to be the best version of myself. Once I experienced that conviction of what I was doing wasn't right.